Hey, hold still, someone is looking at you. You are 1 day old. You do not know it yet, but you are being held up to the light on a cold hillside, turned over in a stranger's hands while a circle of grown men look closely at your body. They are not admiring you. They are deciding something. In this place, being born was not the moment you were allowed to live. Being born was the audition, and the men standing over you have done this many times, and they do not always say yes. Here is the thought that should sit strangely with you. For almost the entire human story, being born different, a twisted foot, a cleft lip, a body that would never run could be the most dangerous thing that ever happened to you, decided before you could speak a single word. So this video answers two questions. One, if you were born different, did that simply mean death? And two, the one that actually matters, what the answer reveals about us. Because the second answer is stranger and warmer than you are expecting. Start in the hardest place, a mountain in Greece and a city that made a law out of that hillside, Sparta. There is a ravine on the slope of Mount Taygetos and the wind comes up out of it cold. A father carries a bundle to the edge. He does not look down for long. He sets it on the bare rock, turns, and walks back toward the city without it, and the mountain is left to do the rest. The Spartans, the story goes, did not let a father decide alone. A newborn was carried before a council of elders and they inspected it. Strong and well-formed, it lived. Weak, sickly, or ill-shaped, it was carried to that ravine, the apotheke, the place of deposit, and left there. To them, a body was not really yours. It belonged to the state, and the state wanted soldiers. Now, archaeologists went and dug under that cliff. And here it gets complicated because the bones they found were mostly adults, not babies. The famous Spartan cliff may be half legend, but do not relax because the thing underneath the legend was absolutely real and it was everywhere. Because you did not need a special mountain for this. You just needed a doorway. Picture a house in ancient Rome. A woman has just given birth and the newborn has not been placed in her arms. It has been placed on the floor, on the bare ground in front of the father, who is standing very still and looking at it, and the whole room is waiting to see what his feet do next. This was the ritual. The child was laid on the ground and the father made one choice with his body. If he bent down and lifted the baby up, toller liberum, to raise the child, it was accepted into the family. It lived. If he looked and turned and walked out of the room, he had refused it. And a refused newborn was carried outside and left, at the base of a column, by the river, on a rubbish heap at the edge of town. A visible deformity was one of the most common reasons the father's feet did not move. This was not a crime. It was ordinary. It happened in daylight. And I want you to sit with how much sense this seems to make from the inside. The world is starving. Every mouth has to be carried by someone's back. A child who will never hunt, never fight, never haul water. In that math, the cold men on the hillside look almost reasonable. That is the story we expect from the ancient world. The weak were left behind. Nature is a machine and mercy is a luxury nobody could afford. It is a clean story. It is also only half of one. Because the ground keeps handing us skeletons that were not supposed to exist. Here is the trick to reading them. A bone remembers. When you are hurt or born fragile and then you die soon after, your skeleton stays sharp-edged, raw, unfinished. But if you were hurt or born unable and then you lived for years, the bone slowly reshapes. It heals. It rounds off. It records survival. So when we dig up someone who could not have fed themselves and their bones say they lived for decades anyway, that is not a medical fact. That is a message. It means somebody stayed. Meet the man who sends that message loudest. A cave in the mountains of northern Iraq, Shanidar, and a Neanderthal we call Nandi. Look at his body. One arm is withered and useless, maybe lost below the elbow years before. He is blind in one eye from a crushing blow to the side of his face. The bones inside his ears say he was probably deaf. One leg is damaged. He walked with a twisting limp. This is a man who could not have hunted, could not have heard the predator coming, could not have run if he had. And every single one of those injuries had healed long before he died. He lived to somewhere around 40 or 50, genuinely old for a Neanderthal. Half-blind, one-armed, deaf, limping in an Ice Age world with no soft options in it. He could not have kept himself alive, which means for years someone else did. Someone shared the meat with a man who brought none back. Someone let him take up space by the fire and gave nothing but his company in return. And here is the part that reorganizes everything. This was not our species. This was a Neanderthal 45,000 years ago, supposedly the brutes. They were carrying their broken. Now come forward in time and south to a rock shelter in Italy called Rometo. 10,000 years ago. There's a young man buried here, laid carefully in the earth with his arms around a woman beside him. And he was small. A form of dwarfism meant his arms were short and he could never have run down game across open ground with the others. In a hunting band on the move, he was the one who could not keep the pace. He was buried tenderly, mourned, kept close in death. Which tells you exactly how he was kept in life. This is a pattern, not an accident. And to feel the full weight of it, you have to understand one bone, the femur, your thigh bone, the big one. In the wild, if an animal breaks that bone, the story is over. It cannot run from what hunts it, cannot reach water, cannot follow the herd. It dies quickly every time. So a human femur that broke and then healed straight and strong is one of the most remarkable objects in all of archaeology. It means that for weeks, maybe months, someone carried that person, brought them water, guarded them while they slept, fed them day after day for no reason a machine would ever accept. Hold onto that bone. We are coming back to it. Keep going all the way to Vietnam, a place called Man back 4,000 years ago. This is the one that is hard to shake. A young man buried curled on his side. In life, he was paralyzed from the waist down. Most of his body would not move at all. He could not sit up on his own. He could not clean himself, could not feed himself, could not shift his own weight off a numb limb. And he lived like that for around 10 years. Think about what 10 years means with no wheelchair, no medicine, no plumbing, none of it. It means somebody turned him so his skin would not rot. Somebody carried him out and back, cleaned him, fed him by hand every day for a decade in a farming village that had barely enough for the people who could work. That is not a miracle by one saint. That is a whole community deciding every single morning for 10 years that his life was worth the wait. And this keeps turning up. A boy in Florida with a spine that never closed, kept alive 15 years. Again and again on different continents, people carrying the ones who could give nothing back. So now hold both pictures in your head at once because they do not fit. The same species, sometimes the same century, that laid a newborn on a rock and walked away from it, also spent 10 years turning a paralyzed man so he would not get sores. The hand that left the baby on the rubbish heap and the hand that carried water to the cave belonged to the same animal. How? Part of the answer is that it was never one rule. It depended brutally on three things. When a newborn, before anyone had learned its face, was in far more danger than a grown hunter your whole family already loved. What an injury to a beloved member of the group was met very differently from a visible mark on a child nobody knew yet. And where, because the single biggest thing that decided your fate was the story your particular people told about what different even meant. And in some places, that story flips completely. Go to Egypt, there is a statue, you can still stand in front of it, of a man named Seneb. He was a person of short stature, a little person. And in the statue he sits beside his wife, who has her arm around him with obvious affection, and their two children stand below. He is not a servant in this picture. He is the head of a family carved in fine stone. In life he was wealthy and powerful, an overseer, a palace official, a man with titles. Because in Egypt, a body like Seneb's was not a curse. It could be a blessing. Little people appear in Egyptian art as respected craftsmen, dancers, keepers of the king's jewelry and animals. And one of the most beloved household gods in all of Egypt, Bes, the protector of mothers, of childbirth, of children asleep in the dark, was himself depicted as a dwarf. So sit with this. The exact same body that could get a child left on a hillside in one land made a person closer to the gods in another. Nothing changed but the story around it. And that reversal happens over and over, with one difference after another. Take blindness. Picture an old man, eyes clouded white, sitting at the center of a ring of people who are leaning in not to pity him, but to listen. His body has stopped seeing the world in front of him, and everyone in the circle believes that is exactly why he can see the things they cannot. This is the figure of the blind seer, and he is everywhere in the ancient mind. The prophet who lost his eyes and gained the future. The poet who could not see the page and so held the whole epic in his memory instead. The Greeks said Homer himself was blind. Blind people became musicians, storytellers, keepers of the songs, because a culture without writing needed living memories, and a person who could not be sent off to hunt could sit and hold 10,000 lines of poetry perfectly. A lost sense turned into a rare and needed gift. And then there is the strangest example of all. Watch what happens when a person suddenly drops and their body begins to shake, eyes rolled back on the ground in front of the whole village. Nobody laughs, nobody backs away in disgust. They go quiet, and some of them lower their heads because, as far as they are concerned, they are not watching an illness. They are watching a god arrive. For a few seconds, this person is a doorway, and something enormous is speaking through them. They called epilepsy the sacred disease. A seizure was not a malfunction, it was contact. The divine reaching into a human body and taking the wheel. And then around 2,500 years ago, a Greek physician looked at it hard and wrote something quietly revolutionary. It is not sacred at all, he said. It comes from the brain like any other sickness, and it has natural causes we simply do not understand yet. That is one of the first times in history someone pulled the different out of the world of gods and demons and set it gently down inside the human body, where medicine could one day reach it. But I promised you the honest version, so turn back toward the dark for a moment, because reverence was not the whole story either. Picture a rich house generations later and a person with an unusual body who is not a prophet here and not a god's favorite. They are kept fed, clothed, displayed as an amusement, brought out at dinner so the guests can stare and laugh, owned essentially for the shape they were born in. This is the ugly twin of all that wonder, and you have to keep it in frame. In Rome there was, bluntly, a market for it, people with rare bodies bought and shown as curiosities and entertainment. And notice the horrible overlap. Sacred and spectacle are almost the same gesture. Both of them stop treating the person as an ordinary human being. Being worshipped and being gawked at can be the same cage with a nicer name. There's no clean, happy ending waiting at the bottom of this. Reverence and cruelty, all the way down, often in the same room. So step back and look at the whole strange animal from a distance. One creature, us, that will leave a baby on a rock and carry a paralyzed man for 10 years. That will laugh at a person's body at dinner and bury another one with its arms wrapped around them. The cruelty and the tenderness are not two different species. They are the same one doing both. So if you had to point at the single thing that actually makes us human, which half do you point at? The best answer anyone ever gave came from an anthropologist named Margaret Mead. The story goes that a student asked her what the earliest sign of civilization was. They were expecting a tool, a clay pot, a spear. Fire, she said, a healed femur. Because in the animal kingdom, she explained, a broken leg is the end. Nothing with a shattered thigh bone survives long enough for it to mend. It is caught or it starves. So a human thigh bone that broke and then healed is proof that somebody stayed with the wounded one, carried them to safety, sat with them, fed them, protected them through the long weeks it takes to knit a bone. The first sign of civilization, she said, is not a weapon. It is one human being helping another through the worst thing that ever happened to them. Let that land, because it changes what all these graves are. Every other animal on this planet leaves its wounded behind. The herd moves on. The limping one falls back into the dark, and that is simply how it works. No cruelty in it, just arithmetic. Watch the herd flow forward and the broken one stop. And then watch the other thing, the human group that reaches the edge of the same darkness and turns around and goes back for the one who cannot walk. Everything we are proudest of started in that turn. So look again at the man in Shanidar, the paralyzed man in Vietnam, the small young man buried holding someone in Italy. For a long time we read skeletons like these as sad as the victims of a harsh world, but that is exactly backwards. They are not records of weakness. They are the oldest, hardest evidence we have of love, proof in stone that a group of humans looked at someone who could give them nothing, and decided anyway that their life was worth keeping. Those broken bones are the first monuments to compassion, and they are older than every temple on earth. And the cliff and the rubbish heap and the dinner party cage, those are real too, standing right next to the monuments in the same graveyard. We did not invent only mercy. We invented mercy and cruelty toward the different in the same breath and handed both down. And whether you met the arms or the rock came down terribly often to nothing more than which valley you happened to be born in. But zoom out far enough over thousands of years and you can see something moving, slowly, unevenly, with every kind of setback. The different body travels from omen to spectacle to patient to person. From a thing that God sent to a thing the doctors study to somebody who is simply fully one of us. It has taken the entire length of human history and it is nowhere near finished, and you can watch it stall and slide back even now. But the direction of the whole long climb was set the very first time a stranger refused to walk on ahead. So go all the way back to the beginning. Back to you, one day old, held up to the cold light, a ring of faces deciding. Now you know what was really in the balance in that moment. Two futures, the rock or the arms. And of the two, the arms are by far the more astonishing because absolutely nothing in nature required them. Every law of survival says put the baby down and save your strength. Something in us very early said no, pick it up. So what happened if you were born different? Sometimes the worst thing a person can imagine on a hillside with the wind coming up cold. And sometimes you became a God's own favorite, or the one everybody leaned in to hear, or simply a person your people refused to give up on and fed by hand for 20 years for no reason the world could see. The skeletons kept both stories. History loved to remember the cliff, it makes a sharper tale. It quietly forgot the ones who were carried. Until we dug them up and their healed bones started, very softly, to talk. So the next time somebody tells you early humans were just brutes clawing their way through a pitiless world, think of the cave at Shanidar. A man half-blind and one-armed and deaf who lived to be old, because for 20 years the people around him chose to share the meat. Tell me in the comments which one stayed with you, the man in the cave, the paralyzed man kept for 10 years, or Seneb, carved in stone beside the family who loved him. Be honest. And if you want more of the human story told the way the bones actually tell it, quieter, stranger, and truer than the legend, subscribe. That is the whole reason this channel exists.